Right. I'm sure we don't have anybody watching yet, but I'm going to say it all again. We are here. This is Roger Street Friedman, and I'm here with Doug Fearn and the Hazelrigg brothers. I don't know your first names yet off the top of my head.
Joff and George.
Joff and George.
You can guess mine.
But. All right, cool. And I see we're live on Facebook. So welcome. We're excited to be here. Joff and Jeff, we're Joff and
George.
We're having a little bit of a technical issue with their audio. But we're gonna soldier on anyway. So anyway, I'm gonna introduce myself, and then maybe you guys can do the same. I'm Roger Street Friedman. I'm a singer-songwriter based on the North Shore of Long Island, and I just released my fourth album called Love, Hope, Trust, which was recorded here in my home studio, using a bunch of gear, but featuring the DW Fearn gear pretty prominently on a number of tracks. And I've been a fan of this gear since the day I started working with it. Doug, you want to?
Yep. Thanks, Roger. Thanks for having us on here. I'm Doug Fearn. I'm the founder of DW Fearn. We're a manufacturer, but I also do a lot of recording, which is really, how I got started and why I was prompted to design equipment to do things that I wasn't getting out of the gear that I had. And a few years ago, I licensed all the manufacturing of the products to Joff and George Hazelrigg, and they've taken over. They've done an excellent job. I couldn't be more pleased with how they've taken the company. And that frees me up for developing new products and doing a lot more recording. So it's been very positive collaboration.
You can hear us?
Sometimes.
I can hear you sometimes. Give it a try.
I'm George, and this is Joff and Hazelrigg Industries, which responsibility of manufacturing and marketing DW Fearn, and alongside equipment, which are that we also license from him. And,
right. I'm going to act as the interpreter.
That's a good idea, yeah, because we're getting like every other word, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think everything came through pretty well, except the Hazelrigg Industries products, which are based on designs that I did, but they've repackaged them differently, and they're more oriented towards the on the road, on the move producer and engineer and live performance. But I don't know. Did I miss anything, guys? Okay, good.
What's the what are the considerations to make a piece of gear like this to travel?
Well, I think it's mostly make it more compact. Yeah, lighter and more compact.
Gotcha.
As you know, Roger, the stuff I build is pretty heavy.
I put it into the rack myself, and there might have been some smushed fingers and cursing involved.
Yeah,
but I did. I mean, I have to say, because I recorded my first album not in my own studio because it wasn't built yet, and I had a portable rack that I brought the two pieces. I brought this the mic pre's and the compressors with me to the studio that we worked at, and everybody there loved it as well. So yeah, I mean, it's featured pretty heavily on all four of my records. Doug, how did you get into recording?
It goes back a long time, and it's a long story, but uh, I was exposed to classical music as a child. My father played in the Philadelphia Orchestra, which sort of developed my ear for what music should sound like. And I also had an interest in electronics, so it seemed inevitable that I would do that. My high school had an FM broadcast station, and we did a lot of music recording there. And it was, uh, sorry, this is live, you know?
Yeah, I thought it was Morse code.
Yeah, it is actually. Um, anyway, I started recording friends of mine that were in bands in high school, and then that pretty much decided me on where I would go. So I'm just really thrilled that I made my living from professional audio for over 50 years.
I mean, that's really saying something.
Yeah, I've been really, really fortunate.
Yeah, I had a I was in a band I was in bands in high school. Actually, I was a little bit of a troubled ninth grader, um, and one of my many sojourns into the principal's office. On one of my many sojourns there, he asked me, "What are we going to do with you?" And Mr. Schweitzer, who in those days ninth grade was still junior high, and high school was 10th grade through 12th. There was an electronic music class, and I said, "Well, I want to take Mr. Schweitzer's electronic music class." And I was the first ninth grader to be admitted in, and got to work with two TIAC, 4-track machines doing and an EMS synthy, and we were doing all kinds of music, concrete, smashing smashing light bulbs in the corner and recording it and slowing it down and speeding it up, and creating um, electronic music in that way. And that was my introduction into recording. And then um, uh, I got a 4-track of my own and started messing around with the little, I don't know if you remember the Tascam 2A mixer. And and um, and from there built a studio with a friend of mine in his mother's basement, and we recorded local bands on 8-track tape eventually. And my story is that I loved recording, and actually we built that studio from scratch. I was about 19 years old, and I had no idea. I didn't know how to solder, uh, and I wired all the patch bays and found the mixing board and spec'd whatever gear we could afford, which wasn't very much, um, and really loved everything about it. And very long story, wound up going out west to my friend and I had a falling out after about 3 years and not really making enough money to support ourselves. Uh, he bought my gear, and I went out west to hang out with a friend of mine in Telluride, Colorado for a little while, and fully intending to come back and go to music school. But that never happened, and my life took a whole nother direction for 25 years. And I didn't record or wrote sporadically here and there. And then when in 2004, right, I had this whole other career going in retail, and my dad passed away. He was older and was suffering from Parkinson's. And after my dad passed away, I got married for the second time. And then about 2 years later, 2 weeks before my wife was expecting our daughter, my mom died suddenly. And then my daughter was born. And so these four kind of events were like a Kairos moment for me in a sense, in that it sort of cracked me open in a way that I hadn't been cracked open before emotionally, and I started writing songs. Found myself back in a demo studio of a friend of mine in Brooklyn, and I was playing and singing into the microphone, making a demo, and it was like one of those scenes from a movie where the world goes from black and white to color.
Mhm.
And that was around 2007, and I made a decision right then and there that I was going to do everything I could to get my reclaim that part of myself that was an artist and a music maker and and all the stars aligned, and I made my first released my first album in 2014, and my fourth album 8 years later, at the tender age of 60. And it's been great. I mean, really have, had a lot of gotten to work with a lot of great people. And on this record in particular, we had Justin Guip. I don't know if you know Justin, but he's got a studio up in Milan, New York. And he was the recording engineer at Levon Helm's Barn for all those records that Levon made, with Larry Campbell producing. And so, long story, but I met Larry, and Larry produced my last two records, and we had Justin engineering the last one, and that was a whole nother level of uh, detail orientedness in terms of phase and mic placement and mic selection and preamp selection uh, um, and the tones. I think so. I think if you've listened to any of it, it's really, it shows. It's really well recorded.
Yeah, it sounds really good. Yeah, no
Yeah.
doubt. Yep.
So so you guys met from were the Hazelriggs also doing engineering, product engineering or equipment design and that kind of thing?
Jeff, give it a try.
We have zero audio from you. Like, now it's the strangest thing. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you a little bit of this story as I know it, and that is that, geez, it's got to be close to 15 years ago, maybe more. I don't know. Joff became an assembler for me, and when he first came over, he brought a couple of things that he had built, and as sort of an audition for the job, which looked just spectacularly nicely built. And I had sort of a standing ad on my website for assemblers, but at the moment that Joff showed up, I didn't really need anybody else. But I just was so taken with the meticulous work that he did that I thought, I've got to put him to work here. And he did that for a long time. And shortly after that, I met George, discovered they're both superb musicians, and we've worked together on so many projects since then in the studio. So we have a sort of this strange multi-faceted relationship between the business, the music, and a few other things that we share in common. So it's been a real good arrangement. So when Joff told me one day that he was considering doing some of his own product manufacturing, and I said, well, I'll help you however I can with that. And eventually what that ended up being was the VLC, which is based on the preamp design that I use in all our preamps the VT1, the VT2, and the VT. There it is,
Awesome.
VT24. So, but in order to position it a little differently, they added some equalization to it. And Joff did all the packaging, the circuit board design, all the metalwork design and everything, which is very impressive. He's got a great brain for doing that stuff. In fact, at this point, I don't even do any of that anymore because I just turn it over to Joff because he just does such a nice job on it. And eventually we, without really realizing it, sort of that manufacturing on their own was, again, the introduction for them to take over my manufacturing. So that's worked out really well. Have I missed anything, guys, that you want to add to that? Okay.
You can always type us. You can always type into the chat if you want. There's a little private chat here that we can communicate with each other if you want to.
Yeah, that's good.
Anything else?
Yep.
Well, the gear looks, the Hazelrigg stuff looks beautiful. And John O'Reilly has raved about it to me. And I have a wish list. I don't think my wife's going to buy it for me for Christmas, but I really would love one of the stereo equalizers.
Mm-hmm.
That's on my because that looks like a beautiful piece of gear.
Yeah, I think that would complete your setup for sure. Well, when you're ready, Roger. There is a plug-in version that will sort of get you 85% of the way there. So
really, so that's interesting.
Yeah, it's put out by Acoustica in Italy. They did a really great job of emulating the VT5. It, as beautiful as it sounds, and if you didn't have the hardware, you'd be perfectly happy with it. But if you hear the hardware, you can hear that it just adds that last 10 or 15% to the sound of it.
I'm always amazed at the difference, though, when somebody's commenting, offering us promotion. Anyway, the difference between a plug-in and the real gear, there seems to be a depth that is added with the analog signal.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, when Acoustica came over here and they spent 2 days, I think on 2 different occasions, doing all the sampling of the VT5. And I think it was a total from the time we first started working on it until it was released was about 2 years, because it took a lot of work to get that to the point where I was happy putting it out. Now, shortly after that, we started working on a VT7 plugin, which still isn't done because modeling some dynamics like that is even more challenging. Equalizer was difficult enough, but the compressor was still a work in progress, although I have confidence that they'll come up with something that'll meet my standards.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that. I'm just always blown away by how transparent this compressor is.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you know the history of that, but it's got to be 20 years ago. I was down in Nashville for some event, and I was having dinner with Dave Hill from Crane Song, who's been a good friend since the day we met 30 some years ago. And I said, Dave, I've got this great idea for a compressor using a pulse width modulator. And I named the particular chip that I was interested in using for that. And I'm explaining it all to him, how this could work and how it could be so transparent and everything. And Dave is just getting a bigger and bigger smile on his face. And finally, when I get done, he says, "Yep, I'm working on that too." And in fact, his design was further along than mine. So I said, "Would you be interested in, licensing your design for me, just for the pulse width modulator circuitry?" And he said, "Sure." And so I adopted basically his circuitry for that, plus the vacuum tube circuitry for the input and output that I basically use in all the products, and then worked on tweaking the compression portion of it to get it to be the way I wanted. And when I finally had that thing working, I ran a bunch of stuff through it, and I was frankly kind of disappointed because I didn't hear it. It was like, oh, this isn't doing much. But then when I switched it out, I said, oh, wait, it's doing plenty. It's just
Right.
you can't hear it working.
Yeah.
And that, to me, was the magic of that circuit.
It's really, I mean, it's great. And I've used this combo. One of the things, I don't know if you see, I still have the, can we see that? It says, I have an M49, and we recorded upright bass, and it's a beautiful, my bass player has like it's ridiculously expensive concert bass, and it's beautiful. And that bass through this recording chain is just, it's spectacular. It's deep, and you can hear the lows and the highs, and the fingers on the strings, and it's just really, it's spectacular. So I don't know what you did, but whatever you did, it's great.
Well, I mean, to me, I have a sound in my head that really goes back to my days as a kid with classical music, being in a great concert hall with a great orchestra. It gives you a different perspective. And the Hazelriggs have, a similar background in classical music before they were involved in jazz and pop music. And it's really fortunate. We often joke that we have just one pair of ears between the three of us, because we tend to react exactly the same to the way things sound. And I know what you're saying about the bass. Joff plays upright bass, and I've recorded him, I don't know how many times, but we always go through our preamp, and we've sort of settled on the AEA 44, R44C as the ideal mic for Joff's bass. But I have used condensers on it as well, and it just really, it captures it. It just absolutely captures it. And I've just never been able to do that before.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. The AEA mics are fabulous.
Well, in this last session we did, except for a couple of condensers on the guitar, acoustic guitar, everything was ribbon mics. And I think all of them were AA except a Royer 121, which I don't think we even ended up using, but was all AEA mics.
Cool.
And I've sort of adopted a recording technique that the Hazelriggs pioneered and showed me how good it could sound. When they do their trio, which is the two of them plus John O'Reilly, they record the drums and bass with one R88, which is an AEA stereo ribbon mic, placed in between the drums and the bass. And they would do it with one mic, except the piano. We prefer the sound of the piano recorded with the lid off and the mics overhead, the piano on the sounding board. And they use another R88 for that. So I pretty much adopted those techniques as my standard. So all the sessions I've done with John O'Reilly and any other drummer that's good enough, because you need a really good drummer to pull this off, It's
Yeah.
just one R88 out in front of the kit. And it gets you a beautiful stereo spread. And, you know, there's never a phase problem.
Right. Yeah, I was kind of, I mean, what we did with that upright was we put a small diaphragm condenser up higher and the M49 down low. And got a lot of really nice detail. But I was amazed many years ago when I took the 10 or 12 mics off the drum kit and made it 3 mics. And what a difference it made in terms of the size of the sound and the depth. I mean, and I think the art of miking and you know, just people you know, in this day and age where everybody is, you know, recording multi-tracks on Logic in there with loops and quantizing and all the stuff that you can do, I think it's easy to forget that the art is really in the playing and the capturing.
Yep, exactly. I think all three of us would agree with that 100%.
And
if it's not in the studio, you're not going to get it on the recording.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
And, yeah.
And also the groove and just having everybody be in the pocket, how important that is. And you can't really fix that in the I mean, you can put it on the grid, but I don't think you can get that feel.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know, we do things a little bit differently. We don't use a click track. We never do. I never have in my life. And I tell people, if I ever use a click track, please shoot me, because music should breathe. It's got to be alive. And, you know, when you work with good people, tempo is not a problem. You establish it at the beginning and everybody sticks to it. But I just don't do that. And we just did a session in here, which was unique for me. We had drums, harpsichord, and acoustic guitar all in the same room, all within 10 feet of each other. And all three instruments were what's that?
Bass too.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, and bass. I'm sorry. Yeah. How could I forget that? And, you know, it just sounds so cohesive and so real. There's some bleed between the instruments into other mics and so on, but it just makes it sound really live and real.
Yeah, that's amazing. How big is the room you're recording in?
Well, my studio it's not rectangular exactly, so it's about 22 by 25, but it has some extensions and it's just a sort of an odd shape. So it's small. The Hazelriggs are even in a smaller studio. I don't know exactly how big that is, but it's got to be what? Yeah, tiny.
It's that big.
Yeah, it's maybe what, Jeff, 20 by 20, something like that. That's not even that big.
He's typing.
And
13 by 18.
I would guess that over a third, maybe 40% of that space is taken up by the Steinway grand piano. So it's a very, very tight room, but they've done an excellent job with the acoustics in there. And we've recorded stuff, quite a few things in there that sounded, well, let me put it this way. You never know it was recorded in a tiny room like that. It just sounds great.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you know what you're doing, you can get a good sound pretty much. I mean, not in any room, but yeah, I mean, my studio is the quote unquote live room. It's pretty small. It's I think it's like 11 by 22.
Mm-hmm.
So the it's kind of hard to get everybody. We actually haven't. I actually haven't tried recording everybody in the same room. We stand in the same room, but the amps are, the amps will be out. Or when we recorded the upright bass, he was out in my kid's playroom is on the other side of this wall. So
Yeah.
there may be some mic panels built into those walls.
Right. Well, we do the same thing. In my studio, I have mic lines running to my shop, which is a fairly nice sounding space because there's so much junk in there. It's just totally diffused.
Right.
And we've on occasion recorded the drums in there when we really needed better isolation because of questionable parts that might have to be replaced. If we have our A team in place, we don't worry about that. But other times we've had to, or we do vocals in there, reference vocal in there so that it doesn't bleed into the other tracks.
Yeah.
Plus I have mic lines going to the garage. So it's a big garage, much bigger than the studio. And occasionally we record something out there, usually not to keep, but we have on occasion. I've actually done vocals in there that were reference vocals that ended up being on the final product that just sounded great in there.
That's great. And yeah, I was gonna say my piano is actually in the living room, and I have my wife is very tolerant. I have a mic panel in the wall, and where can we hear your stuff that you're recording?
Well, for the Hazelriggs, where would they hear it?
It's good. Well, they asked the question. They're asking if we have they see the tape deck in the back. I actually have I have a 24-track MCI with a 16-track head on it, and a mastering deck, which I haven't been brave enough yet to track directly to tape, but I do have I have a system that syncs that records through the tape into Pro Tools.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, my career was about 50% on tape till I switched over completely to digital. And there's no tape machines in here now because I don't have room for them. I have a very nice Studer 2-track that I could, if it needs a little work, but I could use that if I wanted to. But I've had enough tape for a lifetime.
so I use it on my second album. I'm sure you've heard of this clasp system.
Mm-hmm.
It really, people have complained about it, and for those of you who don't know, what it does is it syncs the tape recorder with the computer. So you can just press record on Pro Tools and it starts the tape machine and it does its thing, and it really worked. It works pretty flawlessly when it works. It's kind of like a Jaguar.
Yeah.
And I really do love the sound of it. But on the third record, which was the one before that, I had it all set up and ready to go, and it just things started just going wrong with the tape machine, and then it was the transport stopped working, and then it became such a hassle, and then it smelled like it was one of the heat sinks, the resistors, I guess. I don't know. I remember the big ceramic. I think they're resistors.
Probably, yeah.
Started burning.
Yeah.
It smelled like the thing was going to go on fire, and we decided to unplug the clasp and go directly to Pro Tools. And I do have designs on getting back to tape at some point, just I haven't figured out when.
Yeah, well, if I had a multi-track tape machine here, I probably would run it maybe in parallel with the digital recording, just to have that option. But in here, everything is vacuum tube except for the input stage of the converter.
Right.
And that gives us pretty much that sound of tape, because a lot of that is the vacuum tubes. You know, the characteristics of vacuum tubes are very similar to tape, and without all the hassle of.
In the way they compress.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much a myth, really. What happens is
Really?
when they get driven hard, they just generate more second harmonic, mostly even harmonics, predominantly a second harmonic, which is exactly the same as tape. Also interesting, is exactly the same as vinyl. And that just adds a musicality to it that, it's really difficult to get any other way.
Yeah. Well, I think, and I mean, I'm listened to my last album, which was all digital, but recorded through great microphones, great preamps, great compressors, all analog gear. My board is, I bought it at Sam Ash in 1988. It was an unbalanced console that by Soundtracks in London.
Mm-hmm.
That I had a guy up in Kingston is named Chip for Speak. I sent it to him to be recapped because it had been in storage for 25 years. And he said, if I did a couple of tweaks here, I could make this into a really top-notch console. So he balanced the whole thing, did a whole new grounding, much beefier grounding scheme, and put Cinemag transformers on the mic pre's. So I've got a really nice sounding board, and combined with your stuff, especially on the bass guitar. And I don't know if, but I particularly love it on the drum overheads. It does something to the cymbals that's just magical, in my opinion. And when I listen to the record, it sounds, really fucking great.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and we couldn't agree more. I mean, we experienced ourselves, because that's the sound we've always been looking for.
Awesome. So I wanted to thank you guys very much for joining. I hope some people learn more about you guys. Also, the Hazelriggs have an album out called Songs We Like, which can be found on online. And they say they're
Bandcamp, Roger, Bandcamp.
Oh, Bandcamp. Okay, excellent. And of course, my new album is Love, Hope, Trust, and it's available pretty much everywhere. So you could check rogerstreetfriedman.com. Keep up to date on my comings and goings. And if you're into recording and making really fabulous sounding music, check out Hazelrigg Industries and DW Fearn, because their stuff is top notch. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Roger. It's been a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun, and I would second that endorsement of your record, because I listened to some of those cuts. Not all of them. Didn't get through all of them. Didn't have time, but they sound great.
Well, thank you very, very much. Appreciate it. And all right, I'm going to end the stream. Thanks everybody for tuning in and for sticking it out. And we'll next time we'll try and get the Hazelriggs to be able to say something. But they're very good-looking gentlemen, so they added a lot to the stream. We appreciate it.